Welcome, Ms Legalista here, aka Attorney Sheila. I am actually in a new space and it's in the evening. I'm going to be doing more evening videos because I just got a lot of stuff going on. And this is just when I can fit it in. But this is what we're going to be doing. Yeah, totally different look in the evening. Don't know how this is going to work. But in any case, we are going to be talking about this lawsuit against Lizzo. And I forgot I had my whole camera up. Like, we can turn that off. Ah, okay. So I did glimpse at some of what these other articles were saying. And no, we're just going to jump right into it. I am concerned about what I was seeing. I really am. But let's go to it. Let's bring it up, pull it up here. Let's do a switcheroo. We like that better, right? Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. This is my new setup, so it's going to take me a while to sort of get used to this. I don't know if I even like this. I don't know. Change it this way. You guys let me know in the comments if you watch some of the other videos. You're going to be like, no, go back home. We like you better there. But that's okay. Here is the lawsuit coming out of the state of California. Let me open it up so that I can actually read it and we can see it. West Coast Trial Lawyers, like that's the name of, yeah, one of the firms. All right, we've got this list of complaint for damages stuff over here. Just this list. It says hostile work environment, sexual harassment, failure to prevent and or remedy hostile work environment. Wait a second. Let me check one thing. I know this is sounding not very together this evening because it's a new space. I'm trying to make sure we have it all right. But I forgot to double check, and this is what I forgot. I forgot my mic. I forgot my mic. You guys, give me a second because I really want to use my good mic and not the mic that's on the the what do you call that thing? The camera thing there. All right, hello, hello, hello. Okay, JLab Buds, we are done. I am back, completely set up like I want to be set up now with a good mic. And that only took a total of 4 minutes out of your day and mine. Thank you for hanging with me. Let's go back to this complaint for damages. There is a long list here. It says hostile work environment, sexual harassment, failure to prevent and or remedy a hostile work environment, sexual harassment, religious harassment, failure to prevent and or remedy religious harassment, racial harassment, disability discrimination, intentional interference with prospective economic advantage, assault, and false imprisonment. So we have a demand for a jury trial. Those last two caught me off guard. I had heard that this was a case about harassment. This is the first time I'm hearing this piece about assault and false imprisonment. I totally am caught off guard by that. But let's go ahead and scroll on down and see how much we can get through in this video. Because to be honest, you guys, I've got someplace else I have to be. My daughter's like, I'm going out of town. So I need to be back home in about 45 minutes. You guys know what it's like when you have kids. I don't care how old they are, you still worry about them. Now comes plaintiffs. Who are the plaintiffs? Crystal Williams, referred to as Ms. Williams, Ariana Davis, referred to as Ms. Davis, and Noel Rodriguez, referred to as Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Williams, Ms. Davis, and Ms. Rodriguez, now referred to as the plaintiffs. Let's go ahead and jump into this introduction because that's usually where the details are. And this may be all that I focus on in this video. We'll see. All right, so this action is brought by the plaintiffs pursuant to California statutory, decisional, and regulatory laws. Plaintiffs were employees of defendants Big Girl Big Touring Inc., hereinafter referred to as BGBT. I may just call it Big Girl. I don't know. That's a lot to try to say. Melissa Jefferson, professionally known and hereafter referred to as Lizzo, at all times here mentioned. All right, so let's scroll down now that we know who the parties are. Venue and jurisdiction, California. parties. So we see that they're all residents of Los Angeles County, state of California. BGBT is a Delaware corporation. And defendant Lizzo resides in California. Defendant Quigley resides in California. And it says plaintiff is informed and believes and thereon alleges that each of the defendants herein were at all times the agent, employee, or representative of each remaining defendant and were at all times herein acting within and outside the scope and purpose of said agency and employment. Plaintiff further alleges that as to each defendant, whether named or referred to as a fictitious name, said defendant supervised, ratified, controlled, acquiesced in, adopted, directed, substantially participated in, and or approved the acts, errors, or omissions of each remaining defendant. The true names and capacities of the defendants named herein as those 1 through 10, inclusive, whether individual, corporate, partnership, association, or otherwise, are unknown to plaintiff, who therefore sues these defendants by such fictitious names. Plaintiff will request leave of court to amend this complaint to allege their true names and capacities at such time as they are ascertained. So what they are saying here, let's think about this for a second. What they're saying here is there may be some other people involved, and we're just going to go ahead and call them Doe 1, Doe 2, Doe 3, Doe 4 through 10. You guys get the point. And when they get enough information to find out who these other parties may be, then at that point, they're saying, hey, court, we want to come back and add them in. So let's see how this goes. Let's go back into these factual allegations here, because that's where all of the details are. This case centers on 3 professional dancers' experiences working for Big Girl Big Touring and Melissa Vivian Jefferson, Lizzo, throughout their employment. They're referred to as plaintiffs. Okay, we already saw all that. Let's jump down to the information here. In or about March 2021, Ms. Davis, and Ms. Williams were introduced to Lizzo when they were contestants on Lizzo's reality television show, Watch Out for the Big Girls, which was released on Amazon Prime Video. I saw that pop up, but for some reason, the reality part of it, I was just sort of like, I'm not really into this. So I didn't watch it. During this show, contestants competed for the opportunity to join the Lizzo team as her big girl dancers, accompanying Lizzo in her live performances and tours. In or about May 2021, Ms. Davis was required by Lizzo and BGBT to submit a psychological examination to ensure she was psychologically healthy enough to endure the strain of filming the television show. During this examination, Ms. Davis disclosed that she struggles with anxiety and depression, which occasionally results in binge eating. The waiver of privilege of confidentiality and consent to evaluation form she signed prior to undergoing the examination states that the information disclosed during the evaluation may be provided to production, its representatives, and or any other individuals or entities involved in the show as deemed appropriate by the doctor performing the evaluation or by production. Ms. Davis is informed and believes that her disclosure of her struggles with anxiety, depression, and binge eating were relayed to Lizzo in BGBT. In or about May 2021, Ms. Rodriguez was hired by Lizzo and BGBT. Initially, she was brought on to perform in Lizzo's Rumors music video, but she remained with Lizzo and BGBT as part of the performance group supporting Lizzo in her live concerts as well. While working on the Rumors music video, Ms. Rodriguez was approached with another job opportunity that would have run concurrently to rehearsals for Lizzo's live shows and tour. After rehearsals for Lizzo's live shows were postponed, Ms. Rodriguez approached Lizzo's tour manager, Carlina Giugliotta. I'm not sure. I think I got that right. Ms. Carlina, about possibly taking on this one-day job opportunity. Ms. Carlina responded, "Do you want the job or not?" implying that if Ms. Rodriguez wanted to keep her position as a tour dancer, she could not take any other positions. On or about July 28, 2021, Ms. Rodriguez was officially booked by Lizzo and BGBT to perform with Lizzo at several music festivals. In or about August 2021, filming for WOFTBG began. I forgot what it stands for. I need a note there. During filming for the show, Ms. Davis and Ms. Williams were first introduced to defendant Shirlene Quigley, hereinafter Ms. Quigley, one of the judges and instructors on the show and captain of Lizzo's dance team. Ms. Quigley was not only vocal about her religious belief, but took every opportunity to proselytize to any and all in her presence, regardless of protestations. During filming of WOFTBG, Ms. Quigley took particular interest in Ms. Davis and regularly preached at Ms. Davis about what Ms. Quigley believed to be a shared Christian identity. Also, during filming, Ms. Quigley discovered that Ms. Davis was a virgin, and Ms. Davis's virginity became a topic of extreme importance to Ms. Quigley. In the months to follow, Ms. Quigley would routinely bring up Ms. Davis's virginity in conversations with Ms. Davis. Ms. Quigley even mentioned Ms. Davis's virginity in interviews she participated in and later posted to social media, broadcasting an intensely personal detail about Ms. Davis to the world. Ms. Davis never gave Ms. Quigley permission to share this private detail about Ms. Davis's life. In one of the competitions in WOFTBG, contestants were told they would be required to participate in a nude photo shoot. While some contestants were not bothered by this, the prospect of a nude photo shoot made other contestants severely uncomfortable. Ms. Davis was particularly distressed by this challenge. She was entirely uncomfortable being photographed nude for anyone with access to Amazon Prime Video to see. Yeah. As this challenge was part of the competition, Ms. Davis believed poor performance or outright refusal would have resulted in Ms. Davis being sent home from the show and no longer being considered for a spot on the dance team. While Ms. Davis did not want to be photographed nude, she also dreaded the thought of not earning a spot performing on tour with Lizzo. This dilemma caused Ms. Davis's anxiety to flare, resulting in extreme distress. Ms. Davis broke down in tears on set while struggling to choose between a once-in-a-lifetime career opportunity and putting her body on display against her will. Ultimately, Ms. Davis was allowed to participate in the photo shoot partially clothed in a nude bra and underwear. However, this experience foreshadowed the sexually charged and uncomfortable environment Lizzo's employees would be forced to endure. Watch out for the big girls wrapped filming in or about late September 2021. Ms. Davis and Ms. Williams were both selected to be part of the dance cast accompanying Lizzo on tour. Ms. Williams, Ms. Davis, and Ms. Rodriguez all performed with Lizzo at her festival appearances from September 2021 through April 2022. In or about April 2022, plaintiffs began rehearsing in preparation for Lizzo's The Special Tour. During this time, plaintiffs worked closely with Ms. Quigley as she was captain of the dance cast. Ms. Quigley continued to preach at everyone in her surroundings, especially about her beliefs regarding Christianity and sexuality. Ms. Quigley often made comments deriding people who engaged in premarital sex. Knowing that some members of the dance cast did not share her views, Ms. Quigley also had a party trick in which she would simulate oral sex on a banana in front of the rest of the dance cast. These instances were always unprompted and made plaintiffs uncomfortable. Ms. Quigley's sexually inappropriate behavior did not stop at faux fellatio. I hesitate to say some words on YouTube because they, block you and do all kinds of things. So you see what it says there. Despite her staunch beliefs in opposition to premarital sex, she had no problem sharing her masturbatory habits with the dance cast, often stating things to the effect, okay, this is against my religion, I think it's supposed to be, but today I had an oopsie. Ms. Quigley's sexually explicit comments were so pervasive, the entire dance team knew about her sexual fantasy of having 10 in her face. Again, I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube, but you guys can see what that says. Similar to Ms. Quigley's constant sexually inappropriate comments, Ms. Quigley ministering to plaintiffs was unceasing. Ms. Quigley continued to keep tabs on Ms. Davis's virginity and made it clear Ms. Quigley thought the only way one could be a proper Christian was through similar abstinence. Ms. Quigley also singled out Ms. Rodriguez as a non believer and made it her mission to preach at Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Quigley even told other dance cast members it was her mission to minister to Ms. Rodriguez during the tour. When cast members told Ms. Rodriguez of Ms. Quigley's intent, Ms. Rodriguez specifically requested that Ms. Quigley refrain from impressing her religious beliefs upon Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Quigley became irate and yelled at Ms. Rodriguez. At one point while on tour, Ms. Quigley stated, "No job and no one will stop me from talking about the Lord." Let me just stop there for a moment because this is an interesting dilemma to be in if you're the employer, because you want to protect a person who is in a position where they feel like this other person is pushing their religious beliefs on you. Okay, you're this person. And then, yet, if you fire this other person, then it becomes, hey, you fired me because of my religious beliefs. It's a very challenging position to be in. On one occasion, while on tour, Ms. Quigley interrogated Ms. Davis about her religious beliefs. While in the dressing room doing their makeup in advance of a show, Ms. Quigley began stating her own religious beliefs and asking Ms. Davis if she held the same beliefs. When Ms. Davis expressed a different belief than Ms. Quigley became visibly upset, making it abundantly clear she expected Ms. Davis's total conformity to Ms. Quigley's dogma. While Ms. Quigley was for sure the most extreme in her religious convictions, her sentiments were softly echoed by others in supervisory roles at BGBT. Before rehearsals and performances, the dance team would pray together. While it was not an official requirement for team members to participate in these prayers, it became clear that engagement was compulsory. The responsibility to lead the group in prayer rotated across the dancers, and when it was Ms. Rodriguez's turn, she politely but clearly made it known she did not want to lead the prayer. Despite Ms. Rodriguez declining every time she was asked, Ms. Rodriguez continued to pressure Ms. Quigley continued to pressure Ms. Rodriguez to participate and made Ms. Rodriguez feel judged for declining to lead the dance cast in prayer. Let me stop here again. I was recently in a situation where there was an event and I asked someone to make a comment, and it was not a prayer. It was taking a moment of silence to invite faith, hope, and respect into the space. And that was all it was. So, whatever your definition of all of those things are, that was what it was. It can, like I said, be very challenging for people who don't want to participate in the work environment, And so you have to be really mindful of what kind of situation you're putting your employees in, especially when you then say we're going to do this sort of roundtable thing where everybody's going to take turns. Everybody may not want to do that. They may not have the same beliefs. So it is a bit concerning to read that some people felt like this was compulsory, like they had no choice, like there were supervisors that were, making them feel like this was something that they had to participate in. Let me get back here to wherever it was I was. All right, so it said this part where she felt judged for declining to lead the dance cast in prayer. It says Ms. Rodriguez was struck by Ms. Quigley's insistence on overstepping. Accordingly, Ms. Rodriguez took her concerns to the assistant choreographer, Melissa Charlo. Ms. Charlo, or Charlotte, I think it's Charlo. showed some empathy for Ms. Rodriguez's concern, but merely suggested Ms. Rodriguez take her complaints to Ms. Quigley herself, a wholly useless tactic, as raising concerns with Ms. Quigley had never proven productive. Why am I going to keep talking to her if she is not listening? On another occasion, while on tour with Lizzo, Ms. Williams accidentally brushed up against one of the tour bus drivers. The driver responded by saying, "You can back up on me again." Okay. Obviously, a first read on my part, so some of this is catching me off guard. I'm just letting you know. Implying Ms. Williams' accidental touch gave him sexual gratification. A different driver was known for playing sexually explicit songs on the tour bus. These interactions made the dance cast incredibly uncomfortable and fear for their safety. Ms. Davis and Ms. Rodriguez reported the driver's inappropriate behavior to BGBT management on multiple occasions, but BGBT never did anything to protect the dancers. Management merely questioned whether the drivers were drunk and or driving safely and did nothing to make the dancers feel any safer than they did prior to reporting the driver's behavior. After several reports by Ms. Davis and Ms. Rodriguez, management began denying ever hearing about drivers' inappropriate behavior. As the domestic leg of the special tour came to a close, problems became more abundant, with the last domestic show being played on or about November 19, 2022, and the European leg not scheduled to start until February 2023. Plaintiffs began looking for other work as they were only paid for the time they spent on tour. BGBT preferred plaintiffs did not take on additional gigs, and even instructed plaintiffs' agents to place plaintiffs on a soft hold, meaning plaintiffs would not be paid during the break, but should not be taking on other jobs either. Now, how fair is that? Well, we're not going to pay you. We don't need you to work right now, but we don't really want you to work for anyone else. Okay, let's just call that as wrong. Due to BGBT's soft prohibition on plaintiffs and their team members taking on other jobs, they became wholly financially dependent on the income they received for their performances on the special tour. The dancers then learned that the musicians and other members of the tour were on a retainer in which they were paid a portion of their tour rate while on break from tour in exchange for not taking on other jobs. Plaintiffs and their team members started discussing among themselves how they would negotiate for a retainer of their own. These discussions continued through the start of the European leg of the tour. Making matters more stressful, plaintiffs in the dance cast were only ever given 2 weeks advance notice that they were booked for tour performances. This lack of notice placed plaintiffs in a sort of purgatory, not knowing whether they should start looking for other jobs or to wait for Lizzo's performances to resume. This insecurity made obtaining a retainer of utmost importance to plaintiffs and the dance cast. On or about February 7, 2023, plaintiffs arrived in London, England to start rehearsals and perform with Lizzo at the Brit Awards show. On or about February 23, 2023, plaintiffs performed with Lizzo at a show in Amsterdam, Netherlands. After the show, Lizzo invited the dancers out with her on the town. These invitations were not unusual and attendance was not mandatory, but it was well known that dance cast members were expected to endear themselves to Lizzo. Lizzo often mentioned that she had eyes and ears everywhere and only wanted good people with good energy around her. Those who attended after-party events Lizzo planned were often favored, selected to perform with Lizzo at shows outside of regularly scheduled tour dates, and were widely considered to enjoy greater job security. By not attending, dancers not only risked losing out on being selected for these additional shows and therefore additional income, but also risked being ostracized from the group, putting their continued employment on tour in jeopardy. This particular evening, Lizzo sent out the invite through her close friend and member of the dance cast, Shanta, last name unknown. Ms. Davis and Ms. Rodriguez were at a dinner celebrating the birthday of one of the supporting vocal performers on tour when they received the invitation. Shanta hurried the dancers, including plaintiffs, to accept or decline. Feeling their absences would be noticed and or taken personally by their employer, plaintiffs accepted the invitation before learning what Lizzo had in store for them. As it turns out, Lizzo had planned a night out in Amsterdam's notorious red light district, known for its abundance of sex theaters, sex shops, and clubs and bars, where nudity is on full display. The main event of the night was a club called Bananen Bar, Bananin Bar, where patrons are allowed to interact with completely nude performers. When plaintiffs expressed misgivings about the plans for the night, Shanta stated that it was too late to back out because she had already sent Lizzo the head count for the evening. Again, feeling the looming pressure of job insecurity should plaintiffs abstain from attending, plaintiffs reluctantly went along for the evening. While at Bananan Bar, things quickly got out of hand. Lizzo began inviting cast members to take turns touching the nude performers, catching dildos launched from the performers, and eating bananas. Yeah, okay, we're gonna stop there. Lizzo then turned her attention to Ms. Davis and began pressuring Ms. Davis to touch. Yes, these parts of one of the women performing at the club. Lizzo began leading a chant, goading Ms. Davis. Ms. Davis said 3 times loud enough for all to hear, "I'm good," expressing her desire not to touch the performer. Yeah. The chant grew louder and more strident, demanding a visibly uncomfortable Ms. Davis to engage with the performer. Ms. Davis reiterated her discomfort, stating, "I'd rather not because I'm cool here in the corner." Finally, the chorus became overwhelming, and a mortified Ms. Davis acquiesced in an attempt to bring an end to the chants. After Ms. Davis briefly touched the performer, the group burst into laughter. Ms. Davis abashedly laughed along, trying to hide how uncomfortable this interaction made her. Her efforts to conceal her discomfort were apparently unsuccessful, as on separate occasions, BGBT management in attendance, as well as Lizzo's security team, asked Ms. Davis if she was okay. Ms. Davis replied kind of to one request and no to the other. In addition to pressuring an unwilling Ms. Davis into interacting with the nude performer, plaintiff and all in attendance were unable to avoid witnessing Lizzo's incredibly public displays of sexual affection with her boyfriend. At one point, the couple exuberantly took Shanta and 2 members of the band, which performed with Lizzo, on tour to a back room before returning sometime later. I just didn't need to know that. Upon her return to the main club, Lizzo began to pressure a member of her security team to participate in the night's debauchery. Lizzo badgered the security guard to get on the club's stage until he submitted to her demands. When he got on the stage, his pants were pulled down, exposing his rear. Lizzo began yelling, "Take it off," while a club performer hit the security guard with whips. Plaintiffs were aghast at how little regard Lizzo showed for the bodily autonomy of her employees and those around her, especially in the presence of many people whom she employed. Okay, this is just shocking if true. On or about, I guess I need to plug in my computer. Okay, how much more of this can I get through before I have to leave? And we have to do this in 2 parts. On or about March 5th, 2023, after performing in Paris, France, Lizzo again invited the dancers out. I'd be like, no, thank you. She told them that they were going to go to Crazy Horse, a place where there would be live dancers performing, and they would be able to learn something or be inspired by the performance. What Lizzo failed to mention when inviting the dancers to this performance was that it was a nude cabaret bar. Not until the curtain opened and nude women began to dance on the stage did plaintiffs know what they were in store for. Not only were plaintiffs under the same pressure as before to go out with Lizzo after the performance, but this time the fact that they would be attending a show where nudity was prominently featured was hidden from them, making them completely surprised when the curtain was drawn and nudity was yet again on display. While the show at Crazy Horse was artful and nowhere near as uncomfortable as their outing at Bananan Bar, plaintiffs were shocked that Lizzo would conceal the nature of the event from them, robbing them of the choice not to participate. On or about March 9th, 2023, the dance team submitted their request to BGBT and Lizzo for a retainer of 50% of their weekly tour rate to ensure they would be paid for their time while on break from touring, since BGBT and Lizzo strongly preferred the dance cast not take on other jobs during those breaks. On or about March 16th, 2023, the last show of the European leg of the special tour was played. Before the show, BGBT accountant Ashley Joshi sent an email responding to the dancers' retainer request. In the email, Ms. Joshi offered a retainer of 25% of the dancers' weekly tour rate, exactly half of what the dancers requested. Additionally, Ms. Joshi took the opportunity to scold the dancers for unacceptable and disrespectful behavior while on tour, stating that it was cause for termination. Nowhere in the email did Ms. Joshi explain what she or BGBT deemed unacceptable and disrespectful. Only the dance cast, comprised of full-figured women of color, were ever spoken to in this manner, giving plaintiffs the impression that these comments were charged with racial and fat-phobic animus. This email marked the beginning of a strained relationship with the dancers and management. Plaintiffs and their fellow dancers were blindsided by the allegations of the email and requested a meeting with Kevin Beisler. Mr. Beisler initially agreed to meet, but when he arrived for the meeting, Ms. Beisler simply stated he had no time to talk with the dancers, even though he had devoted ample time to discussions with the musicians and vocalists performing on tour that same day. Mr. Beisler promised he would make time to talk with the dance cast over Zoom regarding the cast's concerns, but never followed through. The dancers performed that night and then returned to the United States shortly thereafter. Back in the United States, the dancers were once again placed on a soft hold and unable to take other jobs. Shows were not due to resume for over a month. Fortunately, on or about April 4th, 2023, the dancers and BGBT were able to agree to a 50% retainer. Unfortunately, despite the advances the dancers made in obtaining a retainer, it became clear that BGBT's management began to lash out at the dancers. Specifically, BGBT management treated the Black members of the dance team differently than other members. BGBT's management team consisted almost entirely of white Europeans who often accused the Black members of the dance team as being lazy, unprofessional, and having bad attitudes. Not only do these words ring familiar as tropes used to disparage and discourage Black women from advocating for themselves, but the same accusations were not levied against dancers who are not Black. On or about April 20, 2023, the dance cast was scheduled for an 8-hour rehearsal. Near the end of the rehearsal, Lizzo arrived and called the dance cast together for a meeting to address the rumors of unprofessionalism. During this meeting, Lizzo also stated that the dancers were not performing up to par and repeatedly accused the dancers of drinking alcohol before shows, even though the dance cast had never partaken in such a practice. Lizzo then stated all the dancers would be required to re-audition for their spots, and if Lizzo was dissatisfied with their performance at the end of the day, the dancers would be fired and sent home. What followed was an excruciating re-audition in which the dancers repeatedly ran through the entire 90-minute show. What was supposed to be an 8-hour rehearsal was extended to almost 12 hours. The re-audition was brutal as the dancers were not allowed a break. During the run-through of the show, Ms. Davis felt she needed to excuse herself to use the restroom. However, she was afraid that if she left the stage at any point during the audition, she would be fired. Ms. Davis was pressed on as long Ms. Davis was okay, we'll just say Ms. Davis pressed on as long as she could until she eventually lost control of her bladder. Still feeling the repercussions of exiting the stage during the run-through, Ms. Davis remained on stage, dancing in soiled clothes until there was a brief segment of the show where the dance cast was not part of the onstage performance and were allowed a short break. Ms. Davis was utterly embarrassed and hurried backstage to change into clean clothes. Unfortunately, the only clothing available to Ms. Davis was a see-through garment provided by the wardrobe department, making her feel exposed and even more embarrassed. Ms. Davis was required to finish the rehearsal dancing in front of male crew members who were known to sexualize the dancers under less revealing scenarios, while wearing completely transparent shorts and no undergarments. After rehearsal was finally over, nothing was said to the dancers, but they were left with the impression that they were to show up the next day. On or about April 21st, 2023, Lizzo called another meeting with the dance cast to reiterate that none of their jobs were safe. Once again, Lizzo mentioned that drinking alcohol before the show was prohibited. As this accusation was not based in any sort of reality, Ms. Williams raised her hand and asked to speak. Ms. Williams went on to rebut Lizzo's accusation of drinking on the job, stating that the dancers had never drank alcohol prior to shows. Ms. Quigley immediately supported Ms. Williams, confirming that the dancers had never drank before shows. Lizzo mockingly responded, "Well, if you're not, then good for y'all." Then stated that maybe the accusations of drinking before shows were on account of the dancers' poor performance. From this moment on, the tension between Lizzo, BGBT management, and Ms. Williams was palpable. On or about April 21st, 2023, Ms. Davis was called into a private meeting with Lizzo and the choreographer Tanisha Scott. Lizzo and Ms. Scott questioned whether Ms. Davis was struggling with something as she seemed less committed to her role on the dance cast. Lizzo and Ms. Scott pressed Ms. Davis for an explanation why she seemed less bubbly and vivacious than she did prior to the tour starting. In professional dance, a dancer's weight gain is often seen as that dancer getting lazy or worse off as a performer. Lizzo's and Ms. Scott's questions about Ms. Davis's commitment to the tour were thinly veiled concern about Ms. Davis's weight gain, which Lizzo had previously called attention to after noticing it at South by Southwest Music Festival. Ms. Davis stated that she was dealing with personal issues, but did not, nor would she ever let it affect her work. In fact, not only had Ms. Davis's performance as a dancer not slipped, but Ms. Davis had also become a better dancer than she was when she was hired. Lizzo and Mrs. Scott were not satisfied with Ms. Davis's answer and continued to press, just as she was at Banana Bar. Lizzo was relentless until Ms. Davis bent to her demands. Although Lizzo and Ms. Scott never explicitly stated it, these questions, accompanied by Lizzo's statements made after the South by Southwest Music Festival, gave Ms. Davis the impression that she needed to explain her weight gain and disclose intimate personal details about her life in order to keep her job. Ms. Davis shared that she had been struggling with anxiety and depression and has been diagnosed with binge eating disorder. Ms. Davis explained her diagnoses and struggles, but made it clear that in spite of her mental health struggles, she was still committed to the tour and performing to the top of her capabilities. In response, Lizzo and Ms. Scott dismissively offered Ms. Davis time off rehearsals to attend therapy. This offer seemed strange to Ms. Davis and made her feel like if she accepted the time off, Lizzo and BGBT would see her as too weak to continue as a member of the dance cast. Accordingly, Ms. Davis declined, thinking it was the only way she could keep her job. This meeting took place immediately before a show, and although Ms. Davis was hurt and emotionally drained by being forced to tell her employees about her personal struggles, she still went out and performed that night. All right. On or about April 26, 2023, Ms. Williams was terminated in the lobby of the hotel the dancers were staying at by Ms. G under the guise of budget cuts. Ms. Williams was the only dancer to get fired on this day. Stunned, Ms. Williams asked to speak to Lizzo. Ms. G responded telling Ms. Williams that Lizzo isn't the best with these things and she's got a lot going on. Undeterred, Ms. Williams continued to speak with Lizzo until Ms. G stated Ms. Williams does not have the best attitude at time and comes across as snarky. Ms. Rodriguez then spoke to Ms. G, expressing disagreement with the decision to publicly terminate Ms. Williams. Ms. G responded that it had to be done and then stated, "We've never had any problems with you." On or about April 27, 2023, all the dancers were called into a meeting with Lizzo to discuss notes on how they had been dancing. Prior to discussing performances, Lizzo addressed Ms. Williams being fired. During the meeting, Lizzo stated she had heard that one of the dancers questioned why Lizzo hadn't fired Ms. Williams directly. Lizzo repeatedly demanded to know who questioned her decision to fire Ms. Williams and once again reminded the dance cast that she had eyes and ears everywhere. Lizzo also stated her preference that the dance cast refrain from socializing with Ms. Williams before Ms. Williams left New Orleans, where the tour was performing that night. Afterward, Lizzo finally gave the group performance notes. All right, I am going to stop there because part two, we're going to talk about Ms. Davis because they get into her eye condition and some things going on with her. And my hand is bothering me and I need a break. I'm telling you. So all of this is really new. I had not expected some of what was in this. I mean, we all know that when people go out, sometimes people get raucous, party like, I don't know. But when you're an employer, there is a different expectation and a different standard that you have to live up to. And it almost feels like Lizzo did not recognize or understand that she needed to differentiate like being out with her friends and hanging out and being out with people who were employed with her. And I'm wondering, did she not have a lawyer on hand? Does she not have a management team that speaks up? And I think sometimes people who make a lot of money and they're stars and celebrities, that their managers just let them do because the managers just want to keep getting paid. And they feel like if they say something, then they're going to get cut too. But in the end, if you don't speak up and something goes wrong, then the whole world is going to know that you were part of that management team and you did absolutely nothing. So isn't that worse? Well, All right, this is the end of part one. We'll come back around to Ms. Davis with part two. You guys, I hope you're keeping up with this, trying to figure out what is going on within this lawsuit. So don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Mwah. Peace.